There's something about Gen X that most people misunderstand. They don't talk about their struggles, not because they didn't suffer, but because in their world, suffering was normal. They grew up in silence. No one asked, "Are you okay?" No one explained emotions. No one taught them how to process fear, stress, or loneliness. You were just expected to deal with it. And when you grow up like that, you stop expecting comfort. You stop expecting support. You start believing that pain is just part of life. That's why Gen X rarely plays the victim, even when they have every reason to. Because to them, talking about problems doesn't feel natural. Solving them does. Think about this. They lived through uncertainty that most people today can't even imagine. The constant tension of the Cold War, the fear that something catastrophic could happen at any moment, and yet, life still had to go on. School, friends, daily routines. So they learned something very early. You can feel fear and still function. That's a level of mental strength that isn't taught anymore. It's built through repetition, through exposure, through experience. But strength like that comes with a hidden cost. Gen X became extremely self-sufficient, but also extremely alone. They don't ask for help easily, even when they need it, because asking for help feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. Instead, they internalize everything: stress, pressure, emotions. They carry it quietly, and over time, that turns into something else, a kind of emotional distance, not because they don't care, but because they've trained themselves not to depend. This is also why Gen X values real relationships, but struggles to express it. They won't always say what they feel, but they'll show up when it matters. They're not loud with love. They're consistent with it. Another thing people don't realize: Gen X witnessed the birth of modern chaos. They saw the transition from a slower world to a hyper-connected one. Before, life had pauses. Now, everything is constant. Notifications, updates, endless information. Platforms like YouTube and Instagram made sure of that. But Gen X never fully adapted to this pace. Not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to. They remember what it felt like to be unreachable, to disappear for hours, and no one questioned it, to live moments without needing to capture them. That kind of freedom is rare now, and they know it, so they stay a little distant from all of it. Not disconnected, just selective. They don't trust everything they see online because they remember a time when reality wasn't filtered, and maybe that's why they seem different. They don't chase validation. They don't measure life in likes. They don't need constant feedback because their identity was built offline, in real experiences, real struggles, real moments. But here's the part no one talks about. Gen X is tired, not physically, mentally. They've been adapting their entire lives, adjusting to change, handling pressure, staying strong when no one was watching. And eventually, that takes a toll, but they won't say it because saying it feels like weakness, and weakness was never an option for them, so they keep going quietly. And that's why they're often misunderstood. People think they're distant or uninterested or even cold. But the truth is much simpler. They just learn to survive without needing anyone to notice. And once you learn that, it never really leaves you. Gen X didn't grow up easy. They didn't grow up supported. They didn't grow up loud. They grew up resilient. And in a world that's constantly changing, That might be one of the most powerful traits anyone can have. There's one more thing about Gen X. They don't just survive change, they expect it. Because every time they got comfortable, something shifted. The rules changed. The system evolved. The world moved forward, whether they were ready or not. So they stopped getting attached. Not to things, not to situations, sometimes not even to people. They learned a quiet truth. Nothing stays the same. And when you grow up believing that, you stop depending on stability. You become your own stability. That's why Gen X rarely panics when life feels uncertain. To them, uncertainty is familiar. But this mindset creates something else too. They don't celebrate wins the same way others do. They don't get too high because they've seen how quickly things can fall. So even in good moments, there's always a part of them that stays grounded, prepared, almost guarded. Another thing most people miss. Gen X doesn't fear being alone because they've spent so much of their life that way. Empty houses, quiet afternoons, long hours with just their own thoughts. For many people today, silence feels uncomfortable. For Gen X, silence feels normal. They don't need constant noise. They don't need distraction. They can sit with themselves and be okay. But that also means something deeper. They've had more time to think, to reflect, to analyze life in ways others don't. That's why Gen X often sees through things quickly. Fake people, fake trends, fake narratives. They don't say it out loud, but they notice. Because they've already lived through different versions of the same patterns, just with different names, and this gives them a kind of quiet intelligence. Not loud, not flashy, but sharp. They don't follow easily. They observe first. And if something doesn't make sense, they simply step back. This is also why Gen X isn't easily influenced, not by trends, not by opinions, not by pressure, because they were never trained to follow the crowd. They were trained to figure things out on their own. But here's the part that hits the hardest. Gen X had to grow up early. They didn't get the luxury of staying naive. They saw reality sooner. Responsibilities came faster, expectations came earlier, and once that happens, you don't go back. You carry that maturity with you forever.